Good morning, internet land. We are just waiting for Instagram as per usual. And we are starting to do our podcast now on Mondays, as you may or may not have noticed, today being Monday and all. So we will be coming at you live on Monday mornings now. Here comes Instagram. So as soon as we're live there, I'm gonna let Mo take over. Okay. Good
Okay.
morning, Mo. We are live everywhere.
Good morning and welcome everybody to DIY Wellness, the show for people taking personal growth into their own hands. On this show, Brian and I are exploring different strategies for improving quality of life and well-being. So in each episode, we pick a different idea or method for improving quality of life. We explain it, experiment with it, and our hope is that you listen, take what resonates with you, and then throw out anything that doesn't so that you can gain new strategies for improving your personal growth and quality of life. Brian, how are you taking personal growth into your own hands this week?
Well, that is a great question, Mo. And I am taking personal growth into my own hands by giving myself a big fat permission slip to let things take longer than I expect them to take, which is not an easy thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. And that's why we're going to kind of get into it today and a little bit about how that works. So, we're going to talk about why it's so important to have deep acceptance of a longer timeline when a longer timeline starts emerging as the timeline that's going to, in fact, be what's required. So finding a way to accept that and adjust to that is so important. We're going to talk through that. We're also going to talk about why it's beneficial to allow things to take longer than we normally take and to go at a more natural pace because our culture's pace is anything but natural. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about how taking the pressure off actually unleashes your creativity. So we're going to talk about all those things today and why it's so beneficial to allow things to take longer than you might expect.
Yeah. Yeah, so the TLDR or like the very short version of this topic is that most times in life, it's very likely that things will take longer than we plan for them to take, whether it be just like completing a certain task or I guess achieving a goal, mostly because A, life is very unexpected, and so things are constantly going to be happening that throw us off track. And B, we we tend to plan for shorter timelines specifically because culture promotes speed and urgency. So,
Mhm.
because we value doing things quickly and getting things over with, we're very likely to, when we initially plan for things, say, okay, I think it'll take about this long, but we rarely plan for life doing its unexpected thing, which it always does. you know?
Exactly. Yeah, but only always.
Yeah, it's only always unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
And so that thing right there, it's like embracing the fact that it's not going to go to plan. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go terrible or that
Mhm.
sometimes things won't go exactly as we plan. But when you build into your own psychological makeup like, hey, things might not go to plan. And so you plan just ground level for it to maybe take longer. You're building in something that in therapy they call it cognitive flexibility or adaptability is just like a colloquial way to put it. So like you give yourself the grace ahead of time so that when something unexpected happens later, you're like, ah, okay, I knew this
Yeah.
was coming, as opposed to like, oh my God, I can't believe it, and the deadline, and so it's
Yes.
like let's make a plan for the unexpected. This
Right.
is that thing about accepting, right? Accepting it. So I want this to be done in a month. And so let me plan that it might take 2 months. If it's done in a month, gravy and nothing unexpected happened. And that's awesome. And that should go down in your diary as the month that nothing unexpected happened. But normally there will be. So
Yeah. So, like a small scale example of this, I recently went to France with my family to go visit my brother, and we had to take a train from Paris to Po, which is where he's staying, which is like way south of France. We planned ahead to get to the train station over an hour before our train was supposed to leave, which, like, in my mind sounded like, okay, more than enough time. We're probably going
way
to end
too
up
much
sitting there
time.
way too much time. We get in our Uber, there's complete, like, dead stop traffic for about 45 minutes. And and so we get to the train station maybe 10 minutes before our train's supposed to leave. We've never been here before. We only have enough time to like find our train, load our stuff, and then have the train leave. And like that is it. So you think you can plan for way more time than you even need, but sometimes you got to do that,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to your goals or the things that you're working towards that are part of like a vision for your life, because m- almost all the time there's going to be something like dead stop traffic, metaphorically, that gets in the way of you achieving that thing, and you need that time. And I think the trap that a lot of people get into is they'll plan for the minimum amount of time that they think that it should take without accounting for the unexpectedness and the surprises of life. And then when a surprise happens or an unexpected event happens, then they're like, oh, I'm garbage because I didn't get it done in the time that is the minimum possible amount of time for it to take.
Yeah. Exactly. That's so good. And where did we get this proclivity to like jam everything into the minimum possible amount of time? Like that's the thing for us to become aware of. And like you hit on it a minute ago and you said like there's no need for the urgency. I think I don't know exactly how you put it, but like I think of it as like urgency culture. I've heard that term
Yeah,
before and I love
right.
it. Like it's so important to reject this urgency culture that's out there and find the way forward from a place of peace, from a place of joy again. And this
Mhm.
proclivity to jam things into the minimum time required, it's a recipe for anxiety, stress, and pressure. Because as
Mhm.
we've been indicating, like life will almost never allow you to get something done in the minimum amount of time required because life itself happens. Like things just get in the way. Like sometimes it's
Yeah.
innocuous things like traffic or someone calls you out of the blue and you're 20 minutes on the phone and you didn't plan to be. And so it's not
Yeah.
necessarily major setbacks, like sometimes major, sometimes minor, but always unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this kind of brings us to our second point, which is that we really want to like encourage both ourselves and you to experiment with going at a more natural pace. And by natural, what we mean is like life will naturally kind of ebb and flow. It'll get crazy, it'll get unexpected. And if you're planning for that, then you're going to inherently feel less rushed.
Yes,
You're going to feel
exactly.
less stressed
Yeah.
because you're expecting it to take longer than it should. And therefore, you can go with the flow of the fact that life is unexpected. And Brian likes to say that when you're more relaxed, then that opens up the space for your creativity. That opens up the space for your heart to enter into the way that you do things and the way that you live.
Mhm.
Because instead of being like, "Ugh, I need this to go right now," then you're like, oh, how can I handle this? Oh, how
Yes.
do I want to approach this? Like it's just a different way of being. And I'm totally guilty of rushing all the time because I am a member of this culture that teaches speed and urgency. And so like Brian and I are not saying that we're, outside of this. We struggle with it
No.
actively.
Yeah.
However, we're just talking about this idea that the option is there to
Yeah.
give yourself more space, to give yourself more time, and therefore to open up the possibility to relax into it and enjoy and create and just like be.
Yeah. And because we struggle with it, we do live in this thing and toggle back and forth between rushing and relaxing and rushing and relaxing. Because of
Yes.
that, we can tell you from our firsthand experience what works and what doesn't work, at least for us. And in my experience, when I forget myself and I'm knee jerk living in the rush urgency culture, there is so much pressure on me, but coming from nowhere, but yet I still feel it as pressure. So, like, what good does
Yes.
that do? And then what I notice happens to me is that I actually have less bandwidth to find creative solutions to whatever are the
Yeah.
problems or mysteries or intricacies in my present moment field of view at that time. Like, so by taking the stance of like, oh, I'm just going to plan for the fact that life might be unexpected, we switch the toggle between pressure and not pressure. And the not pressure toggle is where all the creativity comes from, as Morgan was alluding to. And so you have that creativity available now to bring to bear on the things in your life. It's not like we're saying slow down so that you can be creative to paint a picture. Although if that's your North Star jam, yeah, then paint the picture. But I'm saying like slow down so that you can bring creativity to the minutia on your to-do list that day, or to the unexpected thing that came up. And now you have to figure out like, how do I pick up my kid and also go to the grocery store or whatever? Like bring creativity to bear on that stuff. And it's harder to bring creativity to bear on anything at all when we're behind that 8 ball of rushing and pressure and all of that stuff, because we planned everything for the minimum possible amount of time, assuming nobody would be in traffic, everybody would be happy, nobody would cut anybody off, and nobody would need to go to the grocery store today but you, right? But of
Yeah.
course, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really just this, like that saying, "Don't try to build Rome in a day." Like,
Yeah.
anything that you're trying to do, consider it to be a large thing that is going to take time, and then we work towards accepting it's going to take time, and it wasn't meant to be done all in this one moment, wasn't meant to be done in, 2 days. If it takes longer, it's because it's a longer project, it's a larger project, or it's a task that is in the midst of you having a million other tasks, and therefore it's gonna take longer because you have less bandwidth.
Yeah. Exactly. And this, I love that Rome wasn't built in a day, because that expression, it's so great for where we're at right now, because literally the thing culture is teaching all of us all the time is go ahead, envision Rome, and then you have about a day to build it, or you're a failure. Like that's actually what we're taught in not so many words. And so it's good to
Yeah.
be reminded that like Rome wasn't actually even meant to be built in a day. Could you imagine a city going up in a day? Like everybody would be collapsed under the second floor that falls in on itself because it's not up to code. Like you're not meant to build some
It's not
things
up
in
to
a
code.
day. You know what I mean? Like so don't even try. Like things that are near and dear to you, whether that's an external project or like, hey, I'm trying to quit sugar, or I'm trying to show up as a parent better, or I want to get this other job. It doesn't matter what your goal is, whether it's internal or external, but you can show up differently in the way that you go about trying to land that.
Yeah. I just had a flashback to a different part of my France trip where we actually arrived very, very early to an airport.
Do tell.
And yeah, we didn't mean to, but usually for an international flight, you're recommended to show up, 2.5 hours early or whatever. So we showed up like 3 hours early because we were like, we don't even want to mess with feeling rushed or having any issues. And, if we have any problems with checking our baggage or blah, 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 we were like, no, we're not dealing with that. In France, the airports aren't open 24/7. So I mean, you can go in and like sit, but there's nobody working and there's no stores. And so we got there at like 8 a.m. for an 11 a.m. flight, and then we could just like sit. The only people in the airport, just relax, read, talk to each other, whatever. And my husband turns to me and he's like, I really prefer this.
Yeah,
I really
that's amazing.
I really prefer just not being rushed. It doesn't matter if if I could have been spending my time, doing something else. I'm just glad that I'm
Mm,
not feeling that pressure and urgency. And I
yeah.
think that's kind of the purpose of planning for a longer timeline, is because even if you're taking longer than you theoretically would need to, you get to relax into it and you get to not hate the experience and feel like a failure or like you're doing things wrong. Um,
Mhm,
it's just a
mhm.
completely different way of existing, feeling, experiencing that process. It's
Yeah.
so much better.
That's the key right there, process. Like it's the process. Like by doing this, allowing the longer timeline, we're really shifting our focus away from the outcome to the process. Because the outcome, it's like I have to have this thing and I have to have it in a week, right? But if instead we shift to the process, it's like actually it's okay if the outcome takes 2 weeks, because between now and then, I'm deciding not to be miserable, not to
Yeah.
feel behind the 8 ball, not to rush like a crazy person with desperation, but instead I'm choosing peace, contentment, joy, flexibility, adaptability, all those things. And so when we help ourselves shift into this mindset about the process, we get to, like what you said, not hate the experience. And like, isn't that more to like to not hate the moment to moment experience of your life is more important than to get X or to get Y?
Yeah.
Because on the journey to X or Y, you could die. And there's a poem. But either way, like on the journey to X or Y, like you want that journey itself to be sublime and joyful.
Yeah.
And this is how the first step on having joy in any present moment is leaving this urgency and rushing behind. So,
Yeah.
so
Mm.
let things take longer if you can. And
Yeah.
yeah, anything else that you want to add before we close up shop for today?
No, I think that was a really good wrap up of the lesson. Just let things take longer. It's okay. It'll feel better. And if you don't hate the journey, then when you do achieve the goal, it's going to feel so much more rewarding.
Yes, so true. Right on. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. We appreciate you so much. Keep taking personal growth into your own hands until next week on Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
Mhm.
We will be back for episode 15. See you again soon.
Ooh.
Much love, everybody. Bye.